Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Emotional Eating Unwrapped. Today is an exciting day because I have a really special guest. I'm excited to bring her on. Her name is Dr. Jen Haley, and she is a board certified integrative dermatologist, nutrition, and fitness expert. And she also is the host of her own podcast called Radiance Revealed. And we're going to talk all about embracing your authentic self. We're going to talk about empowerment for women. We're going to talk about self confidence. And we're just going to learn all of this through the lens of Dr. Jen Haley. And welcome. I'm so excited to have you here today.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity to speak with your beautiful audience.
Oh, you're so welcome. I'm so excited because anything that's integrative, holistic, anything that any philosophy and any work that people do in the world that brings together mindset, empowerment, nutrition, and just teaching women how to prioritize themselves and all of those different modalities is something that is such a big value for me and what I love to teach women as well. And I just want today to be about you go about how you go about educating women and how you just change the world and just impact the world with what you do. And so if you can just take the floor, share a little bit about you, about your journey, um, anything you want to share about how you really guide women towards becoming their best selves and feeling the most confident in their body, in their skin.
Sure. Yeah, there's so much to share. So I'll start with being in college. So when I was in college, I went to Cornell. I studied nutrition undergrad. You know, when you're a nutrition major, you have a lot of pressure to practice what you preach, but you're also, not always eating and living the healthiest way because it's the first time you're on your own. And I had what I realized at the time unhealthy eating behaviors where if I ate something like Ben and Jerry's, I would go run like 6 miles, to overcome the guilt of having that, right? So I woke up one day and I just said, this is ridiculous. This isn't healthy. I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to only exercise when it's fun because everything in my life is about doing, checklist, doing, accomplishing, just trying to be everything for everyone. And I think in our society as women, we're often trained to be that way. Don't make waves, behave, uh, consider yourself last, and just show up as you're supposed to be in the world. And for me, exercise had to become that one recess, that fun time in my day. So I made a mental switch in my mind of like, okay, I'm going to only exercise if it's fun rather than a pressure thing I have to do. And everything shifted for me when I did that because then I was able to say like, oh no, I'm not going to be running 8 miles. So maybe I don't need to eat the whole pint of Ben and Jerry's. But like, it was more, okay, I want to eat healthier. So I'm going to eat like the most nutritious food, and not look at calories. Like, where can I get the most nutritionally dense foods? So that was kind of my journey with myself. When I was in medical school, we don't learn anything about nutrition in medical school. So thankfully, I had that background. Now, what I learned at Cornell, we don't really believe to be true now because the knowledge base is always expanding and broadening and changing as we get new information. And what I learned in medical school was like your genetics were your destiny. And that's absolutely not true. And this is the coolest part about all of it for me is the fact that 80 to 90% of your genes are there, but don't determine the outcome. Only 10% of your genes determine the outcome. So every choice we make every day, whether it's to exercise, whether it's to have a healthy relationship versus a toxic relationship, whether it's to put real food in our mouth versus something that's ultra processed that our body doesn't even consider as food, all of those choices empower us to be our healthiest selves. And it's basically called epigenetics, and it's our exposome, what we're exposed to during our lifetime, and it's cumulative, so it's not one bad thing. So if you decide to do one thing that's not perfect, you don't have to beat yourself up because at the end of the year it doesn't really make a big difference. So I find that that's super empowering, and it's a great way for me to incorporate it into programs and regimens that I provide my patients. Because when I look at the skin is your largest visible organ. So it's representing the health of all of your other organs inside your body. It's just visible. We don't have to poke you or prod you or do blood tests or anything like that. So if your skin is inflamed, probably inside of you is inflamed. So let's address inflammation. And we can do that through food. We can do that through managing cortisol and stress. We could do that through many, many, many different ways in this world. But it's not like you have to depend on a doctor to answer your questions. We have a world where there's information. There's a lot of bad information out there, but there's also a lot of good information, and you can empower yourself to do what's right for you. And in that process, what I find to be the most essential, because I'm not dogmatic, there's no right thing for everyone. There's something that will be right for you, something that will be right for someone who's listening, and something that will be right for me. And they're all very different. So, in this process of like becoming in tune with yourself and learning your own intuition, you will know what honors yourself and you will be able to follow that. And I always have this mantra, which I've had to train myself because I basically lived the first 40 years of my life for other people, which is easy to do when you're a mother and a wife and, and a professional, is just putting yourself last. And now my mantra is prioritize myself, consider others, prioritize myself. And when you do that, you show up so much more authentically, so much completely, without resentment, and giving the best that you can to every situation, which is really what we want to do, right? Because that's how the world goes around. So that's a lot, but that's kind of my background.
Yeah, no, I mean, I love that. I love that philosophy. I love where you got to with with recognizing that it's not just about food, it's not just about um getting to the result. It's not just about it's really just bringing the joy back into life and giving yourself permission to not take responsibility for everything all the time, and realizing much that how much that mindset, or how much that belief system that is your responsibility, was impacting the way you were showing up in the world, probably your nervous system, and then your nervous system that was impacting your epigenetics, and that your genes and everything, and how hormonally that can be an impact, that could impact as well. And so, if you're willing to share maybe some of the specifics of the journey, potentially, you mentioned that you went to medical school. You had, I'm sure, in the 20 years, 20 plus years that you've become this amazing woman, you've had a journey. So if you're willing to share some of that personal insights as well, and maybe some aha moments that came up for you, that would be great. Because I think that the women that listen to this podcast, I think, resonate a lot with you. They're they're ambitious, they're high functioning, professional, smart, um, you know, just give so much to the world. And I think a lot of what they are trying to balance is that exactly what you described. So yeah, I would love to hear some particulars.
Sorry, I put you on mute, and we're probably going to have to edit this out because a giant truck just decided to come by the window. I guess it just shows how real it is.
Yeah.
So, but I hear you. I absolutely hear you. It's definitely a journey, and it takes a lot of moments of quiet. And for me, that's always been a hard thing. As a woman who is highly motivated to get stuff done, driven by the to-do list, driven by the accomplishments, as many women are, and I believe we can be successful in all areas of our life. We can't be perfect in all areas of our life. So the minute we relinquish the demands on ourselves to be perfect in all areas, I think authenticity is so much more beautiful than perfection. And it's a little switch that we have to have in our minds. So It was hard for me when I worked full time when my kids were young, and I tried to convince myself quality over quantity time. And there's something to that, having the quality of what you do and how you show up is more important than the quantity, especially when we're devoid on quantity. Specifically, though, like, do you want to address the eating part? Do you want to address the skin part? Do you want to address like what
Yeah,
specific
so
part?
so I know you didn't want to have the initial conversation, but typically I like to have it because I like the edit to be really raw here so we know. So because you had suggested that it would be a really just go with the flow, just don't ask me what I want, just say how you feel. And I'll ask you questions. If I like in the direction, if I feel like there's something more I want to get out of what you're saying, I will lead you with a question. But don't worry, just like go with what comes up for you.
Okay, so what comes up for me is, when I was a young doctor, I had this belief. I think when you're young, often you live in a very black and white world and you think like the world has to be this way or this. And it's so not true. Like, really, we live in the gray zone, and the beauty lies in the everything and the nothing at the same time. And even though I believe that if I learned every single skin disease, if I learned every little fact that medicine had taught me, I would be the best doctor and I would cure everyone. And as I moved along, I listened to patients. I'm not like in the paternalistic society of like, this is information, be gone with you, like I
We need more of
listen.
you.
Yeah, I listen and I hear what people say, and they would give me information. Like, I'd say, why is your acne so much worse? Well, Dr. Haley, I went home over Christmas and I had all this junk. And I'm like, aha, sugar seems to be linked to acne. Now we know this is scientifically shown, but 20 years ago it wasn't. It was very, very absolute. We were taught nutrition had nothing to do with your skin. And that just seems so crazy to me, because how do you expect to take a pill in your mouth through your digestive system that's going to magically work, but yet food plays no role? Like, how does that even make any sense, right? So I think I always had questioned it with my background in nutrition. And before the whole biohacker world, I was always trying to hack shortcuts, because who doesn't want to have shortcuts if you can't have an edge on someone with anything, right? So whether it's a
spoken
quick
spoken like a true type A.
totally, totally, right? Like, if I could do it quicker, faster, better, with less effort, I'm all for it, right? So I was always just listening and trying to like aggregate all this information that I would get from my patients and learning from them. And that evolved my thinking process, along with the fact that I realized on the cosmetic world of dermatology, I've worked in the celebrity world. I worked at the US Capitol. So I've worked with very prominent people that had unlimited resources when it comes to finances, right? They could pay for any sort of procedure that was available to make them look more attractive. And I don't know if it's just because I'm super energetic and intuitive that I felt like something was off. Like, they might look good two-dimensionally on a magazine cover, yet they weren't what I call radiant. They didn't have that glow. They didn't have like that beautiful aura around them.
Hmm.
So I knew that something was missing. I'm like, there's a piece to this that we're missing, and science isn't teaching it to me. So I wanted to try to dig in deeper and figure that out on my own, as well as realize that Western medicine is very reactive. We're great at taking care of disease, but I don't want to take care of disease. It's like a dog chasing its tail. Like, I want to discover new pathways and prevent disease so that people can live like their best life and never feel sick. So that's where I started to incorporate, a little Chinese medicine, a little Ayurveda, a little bit of integrative stuff, nature. I mean, really, if we cycle with nature, which means you have to be intuitive with your body, your cycle, your rhythm, the moon, all the other stuff, the day and the night, it's effortless. It's absolutely effortless.
Oh my God, you're 100%. I can't tell you. I have such a similar background. I'm a functional dietitian, and I'm trained in Ayurveda. I specialize in Ayurveda and also traditional Chinese medicine. I been a yoga and meditation teacher for 18 years at this point. Started practicing in the late 90s when I was 18, right? 19. So now I'm going to be 44. And so, you know, it's amazing to, and I teach yin yoga, which is very much about the points as well. So, and Ashtanga. So, I mean, over the years, right? Yin yang. And so it's just so amazing when you see Western trained doctors. I just love the fact that you have this respect for the Eastern traditions and it's lived and it's embodied. And obviously, you have such a natural, intuitive sense for this other stuff that I really think is a sixth sense. It's not something that you could be taught in school. I feel that I have the same with people as well. And so a question I actually wanted to ask you, and this is actually a real question. It's coming from me because as a functional dietitian, I would see patients when I was working more clinically or more in a private practice in that way. Um, I'd see a lot of girls, and you're talking about sugar, right? So obviously, we know sugar is not obviously, but now we know sugar is a trigger for acne and it's not, and all these different things. But here's the thing that I want to ask you. I would see, and this has to do with the food. I would see girls and women. I work mostly with women coming in to see me. And I think this is a problem because there's so many healthy foods, right? Like granola, or like, I don't want to call out different, like, healthy food things, or like raw food diets, like all these different things. And I would see them come in on these cleanses, on these diets, on these quote unquote healthy things. And they'd be bloated, they'd have acne, they would and I'd look at their meal plans, and it's like density crazy. It's like nuts, it's like all raw, it's granola, it's all of these things. And I think there's a real problem. I'm curious for you if you see it too, this marketing issue for healthy foods. And it's like vanity junk food. It's like what I call vanity junk food. And I'm curious if you feel the same way, because a woman would come in and I would see their aura and they'd be so perplexed as to why they're gaining weight, they're bloated, their skin is like not great. And I would look at their food and they're like, I don't get it. I'm having smoothies and I'm having like this salad with avocado and almonds and sesame and like all these things. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I'm curious your thoughts about that. And before you answer, I also know, and as a functional and integrative professional, there is such a thing as an allergy that comes when you eat something too much, like leaky gut. So it's like they can get leaky gut from this type of eating, correct?
Yeah, there's so much to cover there. Okay, so I love that vanity food. I'm totally copying that. That's a great term. Because as you're talking, the first thing that hit my mind is like, who gets to decide something's healthy?
Right.
Like, who gets to define that? So, whenever somebody says something absolute, I want everyone listening to question and say, like, who gets to decide? It's almost like, who gets to decide what's beautiful? Because when you look back, like 500 years, being very overweight was beautiful because only the rich can do it. You know what I mean? Just like
Mhm.
being fair skinned and not tan used to be beautiful because only the laborers were out there in the sun. So, and then things change. So, who gets to decide that? And why does it have to be that way? So, I mean, obviously, if it's not one ingredient from nature, it's not the most healthy. And then, with Ayurveda, some people do better with cooked food, right? Versus raw food. I don't do well with raw food personally. And that's more complex that anyone listening should work with a practitioner who understands this and their constitution and stuff. Um, the other thing that I wanted to touch on with granola, because granola is one of my favorite, like what I call junk foods. It's like one of my favorite foods, especially if I go mountain biking and I'm like really ravenously hungry. I could eat a bag of it. And I find that wearing a continuous glucose monitor can be very helpful in people because you don't know what's going to affect you until you wear one. And things like granola will bump my blood glucose up to about 300, which normal is around 80 to 120. and 300 is well into the diabetic range. So genetically, if I was overweight, I would certainly have diabetes. I've got the gene for it. So I do better with lower carb kind of foods, and
Mhm.
definitely not foods that are my body's going to turn into carbs right away. So what people don't always understand is sugar isn't the only thing that turns into sugar in your body. Anything that's a processed carbohydrate that doesn't have a lot of fiber, like a vegetable, it could be rice, it could be pasta, it could be bread, it could be granola and oats. Those turn into sugar like molecule in your body very quickly. And sugar like molecules are super inflammatory. It's kind of fascinating because when they do functional MRIs of the brain, it lights up part of the brain as much as heroin. Like that's how addicting sugar is. It's
Yep.
as addictive as heroin, but we don't have rehab centers for sugar, yet like most of us are walking around with sugar addiction. So don't beat yourself up if you have it, because it will take weeks to get off of it, and then your palate will change.
Right, but that's also why I say that emotional eating or binge eating or things like that, it is it's an addiction, but unlike heroin where no, I'm not saying it's an easy addiction to get over, obviously it's not. But you can abstain. Obviously, it
Yeah.
takes a lot of work. You can abstain from food per se. I think that going back to your point in the beginning, it really is about attuning to your intuition and your self love and like your really your core sense of purpose and self value in order to be able to overcome an addiction and be able to have it be a moderate thing in your life eventually.
Yeah, and there's certain times of the month where you're going to crave more carbohydrates, like right when you're in your luteal phase before
Oh
you get
yeah.
your period. So give into it, because that your body needs the extra. It's growing an organ. You're basically growing an organ right before your period. You're growing the uterine lining. So it's okay. Like, don't beat yourself up. If you're going to eat something that's not healthy, it's not free range to eat a ton of things that are unhealthy. It's just like in the spectrum of a year, it's very insignificant. In the spectrum of a month, it's insignificant. And enjoy it when you're doing it, because
I
that
think that's
is,
the hardest part, right? It's getting people to feel worthy of enjoying it and not feeling jumping to the guilt.
yeah, like, don't beat yourself up. We've been
Correct. Yeah.
there. We've all been there. Gosh, there were so many other things I wanted to talk about. So the glucose in your system basically causes a ton of inflammation. So I'm not going to lie, this morning, full confession, I woke up so early. I had potato chips for breakfast, right? And I never do that, but I'm at that phase of my cycle right now. Even though I'm 53, I'm still cycling like regular. It's
Good
kind
for
of,
you.
yeah, but you're more familiar with it over time. So you're like, okay, this is just normal. Next week I won't be as hungry, and it's not that big of a deal. But then, so my blood glucose doesn't bump up, I make sure I have some fiber and some protein with it, so that it doesn't bump up my blood glucose levels, as opposed to just having an infusion of sugar, which can
Mhm.
be really damaging. I did want to go back to your point on the aura of someone or the radiance of someone. I think there's so much more to that than just what we eat. I really think it comes down to our thoughts and how we feel about ourselves.
100%. It's so much about belief systems and like all of that.
Yeah. So the best thing you can do for yourself, rather than take diligent notes about what to eat and what not to eat,
Yeah.
is to, like, it's easier said than done. It takes a significant amount of work to sometimes reparent and rechild yourself and work on transgenerational trauma and things that you may carry that don't belong to you. And there are people out there who can help with this, but you really have to get to a place where you're like, I'm showing up the way I am, and I will vibrate with people who are aligned with me. And that's not everyone, and that's okay. I don't need to please everyone, as long as I'm showing up in kindness and love and honoring myself and contributing to the world. The end, period.
Exact. Yep. Yep. I think that was the hardest. I think that's was the hardest thing for me. And still, and I think it's still a daily practice to be with the discomfort of prioritizing yourself and of being able the both and, right? It's like I know that I'm putting myself first, and I'm still feeling the discomfort of potentially being worried that someone else is mad at me, and I can hold both of those feelings at the same time and still make sure that I don't abandon myself
Hmm.
and, take the actions for me because I know what that is, and I know that I'm still going to feel maybe a ping of not great as well, and both things can be held by me at the same time. And I think growing that capacity, and I think that having a wide capacity that can hold things while still having the clarity of the right action is one of the biggest skills to creating that aura of authenticity and radiance that you described, and that you champion as well.
Yeah, and it's never perfect. I mean, the way I see it is it's my responsibility to tell someone if I'm angry or I'm perceiving something, and giving them the opportunity to clarify their intention behind what they did or said. And it's also their responsibility. Like, I spent a really long time projecting and anticipating what I thought other people needed. And it just builds up resentment within you when they don't receive it the way you wanted, or they're not grateful for it because they never really wanted it, So, like, let people ask you what they need, and we don't have to fix things for other people. Everyone has their own journey. And I have, when you have little kids, it's different, but my sons are 17 and 19 now. And there's things I see, I don't like it. I'm not going to rescue them because it's their own journey. Like, we all have our own journey, and we have to just honor people's journey. And it may not be what we want for them, but it's for them to figure out.
I mean, that is the best kind of parenting, I think,
And for
honestly.
our husbands and our relationships, because
Yeah.
as women, we're just be like, here, honey, here's your vitamins. I don't want you to get sick. And then you're like, wait, I didn't even take my own vitamins today. Like, I didn't even get to work out because I was so busy doing everything around the house so that they would have an easier day, that I didn't even take care of myself. So it's not about being selfish. It's just about honoring your own needs and checking in with yourself, as opposed to living in the should world. Like, I tell people, stop shoulding all over yourself because, like, no more shoulds. Like, you do it or you don't do it. It feels good. It doesn't feel good. It's the right thing to do, even if it's not fun. Sometimes it's the right thing to do from an integrity standpoint, but it's not this should kind of thing.
Completely. And I think something else, because I also, in so many of my courses, and a lot of people always think it's about food. And like we say, it is, there's education to have, like you just talked about glucose. And I think it's important to understand, but a lot of the transformation comes through this shifts in the self-worth, the self-value, the self-love, and all that stuff. And I think that, it's the communication piece and the self expression and the feeling empowered in that. And something that I have adopted for myself as somebody who was similar to you, very hyper vigilant, very codependent in other people's like worlds, and kind of always thought about, was always in their box. Obviously I've been in therapy. And it's, I think that one of the biggest things that now I do with my husband, and we're not having kids, so I have so much respect for parents. I honestly have no idea that dynamic. I feel like it's so amazing and so just such a different type of thing. But what I had to learn creating a healthy attachment and a healthy relationship with my husband was speaking my own needs and expressing myself, and also coming from a place of believing that he wants to collaborate with me. Like, we want to get to the place where we're both happy. So I think that like adopting that belief gave me the confidence in the beginning to say things that might have triggered a bit of like discomfort, because I would go into it being like, of course he wants me to be happy. Of course he wants us both to be happy, where we can get to a place of collaboration. And I think that was a huge thing and really relaxed my nervous system, where now those conversations and I now see it as an opportunity to express myself, um, and I'm excited about it when those opportunities arise.
That's super beautiful. I just wanted to touch on the point where you're like, oh, people who have children, blah blah blah. I I've, as I mentioned earlier, I've seen when you see like really, really famous people naked, everyone's the same, right?
Yeah.
So by doing like skin checks on people, I mean, honestly, probably close to like 100,000 people at this point, everyone is on a level playing ground. And um, I have it's such a beautiful gift. Like I have so much gratitude for being able to see the real people that are behind the scenes that isn't the way we show up in the world. And I only want to say that because I don't feel as though anyone has it harder or easier than anyone else. Like no matter how perfect someone's life looks, it's only a piece that we're seeing. Everybody has challenges and difficulties and insecurities, no matter how beautiful they might look from the outside. So, like, for anyone listening, just realize you're not alone. Like, everyone, no matter how perfect they look, they have something.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, we
I
all
think
do.
absolutely. I mean, humanizing people and just like get like you said, letting yourself off the hook, you
Yeah,
know?
I know. I can touch a little bit on like some good things to do with nutrition for skin if you want.
Yeah, that sounds
Okay.
great. Yeah, so I'll just ask you the question and we can edit it in. So can you share some tips on what you can do nutritionally for skin, whether that's food based or lifestyle based?
Sure. So there's all these hacks out there, and people like to make things complicated, but I'm pretty minimalistic. I try to simplify it as much as possible, even though it's not always simple. So the more real food you eat, the better. So something like avocado or something like piece of salmon or broccoli, like they're all healthier than something that you buy in a package where there's multiple ingredients. So these companies that sell things to us, they're profitable companies, right? They're not doing it out of the goodness of their heart. So when you get a good deal on something, it's because they're giving you cheap products, basically, that often our bodies don't even identify as food. So when you just say you're having like a Coca Cola or a soda, any type of soda, your body is using so many resources. Your liver is using a ton of resources to detoxify all the artificial colors, the flavorings, the sweeteners, just to get water. So all those resources that would naturally metabolize hormones so that hormones can be utilized properly now are not being able to happen because your liver's busy doing other stuff, just sort of like alcohol would do as well. So minimizing drinking, minimizing processed foods, and focusing on whole foods is huge. You mentioned earlier about having a lot of the same foods and how that can cause allergic reactions. Our bodies are meant to cycle. So even though broccoli, salmon, avocado are healthy, if we have them every meal every day, we're going to be deficient in many things. So we want to have the most variety of things possible because it's sort of like a nickel allergy on the skin. We see it very frequently in people who wear a lot of jewelry because the more you're exposed to something, the more likely your body is going to recognize it as being foreign. And that happens on the top of the skin, that happens in the gut as well, which is an
Mhm.
extension of the skin. So we want to have varieties and cycle. Like eggs is a big one if people have it every day, which I tend to do. Like you need to take a little bit of a break or your body can start becoming intolerant of it, whether it's a true allergy or an intolerant. It just stops feeling good.
Yeah, because I know when I used to do like pinner tests or like things like that with my clients, a lot of them would come back with allergy. And for people that are listening, I'm doing air quotes, allergies for the things they eat every day. And they're like, oh my God, I need to take this out of my diet. I'm like, no, you're not allergic to this. Like, you just need to take a pause and come back to it in a bit, but you're not allergic. You don't need to completely take it out of your diet. So, can you just share a little bit? You mentioned about how the gut is an extension of the skin. Do you want to share just a bit about that? Because I think people know that, but it would be great to hear you kind of talk about that more.
Sure, we're on the tip of the iceberg as far as what we really know about the microbiome. There was actually a study that came out last week showing L rhamnosus. There's a we know that the more diversity you have in your skin and the more diversity you have in your gut, the healthier you are. So the gut, brain, and skin all come from the same cell when we're in utero, which is really cool
Whoa.
because if you think about like your mouth ends, right? And then it goes through your, entire gut and comes out your anus. And it's just a continuous kind of lining, basically, inside and out. And our brain also is related. So often I find if I put someone on the acne diet that I give them, they will lose weight and they will have better moods because our gut produces serotonin and other neurotransmitters that help boost our mood and make us like happier people. And it's a cycle because then we're like more motivated, we have better relationships, and we go to the gym more and we exercise better. We have more clarity so we can make better choices for diets. So it's just kind of getting that ball rolling down the hill often, and then the whole cascade kind of works. So we don't know, like, I can't say take this probiotic and you will have clear skin. We're not quite there yet. We're finding certain ones can help for acne, certain ones can help for different things, but honestly, like the more variety the better. I like megaspore probiotics. Basically, they're like a spore based probiotic. I like those a lot. I also like prebiotics or prebiotic fiber, and having a lot of fiber, inulin, stuff like that in your diet, which I'm sure you can go into way better than I can.
Like
And
psyllium husk and like beta glucan, things like that.
yeah, yeah, and we could even use beta glucan on the skin too. There's
Mm.
some nice anti-inflammatory properties of that, and like it helps the immune system as well. And our gut is an amazing immune system. Our skin is an amazing immune system. When you look at a patient that gets severe burns on their body, what causes death is usually infection because they don't have the barrier between them and the outside world. It's dehydration and infection. That's
Right.
what the skin does. It keeps the good stuff in, keeps the bad stuff out. So, I mean, all of those are interrelated. And as far as, you can look at taking some probiotics and prebiotics, but really like maybe introduce some kimchi and sauerkraut in the diet. There are cultures that have a lot of that, and the rates of breast cancer, like in Poland, for instance, are much lower than when Polish women moved to the United States and they stopped having sauerkraut. So there's a lot to be discovered about this. There are a lot of benefits from eating like what nature provides to us for free. And we just want to take advantage of it and change our palate a little bit and cycle. We're meant to cycle with the seasons. I don't believe we're meant to eat fruit all year round. Like, I'm not for that at all. It's meant to be there in the summer to fatten us up so we can survive the winter. It kind of is.
Interesting. People are going to be like, what? They're like, that's a whole other topic.
But if you're going to
Um,
choose like fruit over Oreos, you go for the fruit every time.
or you could have an Oreo and, the fruit
I
sometimes.
think it's just lard with sugar in it, isn't it?
It is. I don't know.
Yeah, like once you start
Yeah.
thinking about the food and how the companies are just trying to like, I mean, I'm
Ugh.
not a conspiracy theorist or anything, but if you start thinking about like, okay, these companies are just trying to poison me and take my money, you'll just go for the real food. Even though it costs more, nutritional density is so much higher with a real food than it is for a packaged
100%.
food.
I mean, I say that all the time. Like, I don't even talk calories, healthy, unhealthy. I'm like high nutritional density, high nutritional value, low nutritional value. It's like you can have both, but like try to have high nutritional value at like 80 to 85%, low nutritional value at like 15 to 20%, and try
Yeah.
to keep it there just to not be that extreme with yourself. Some people who are more of those perfectionist types that we're trying to not, that we're trying to soften those edges a little bit.
Yeah. The other thing I just wanted to bring up because we touched on it earlier is if someone's really overweight, and then you're doing everything right and you're super healthy and your diet's clean and you're exercising, because exercise and movement and healthy blood flow is essential, because no matter what you eat, it's not getting to your skin or your organs if you don't have a good blood supply. So having a good blood supply
Mm,
allows nutrients and oxygen to get to where it needs to be and allows your body to remove metabolic waste products. So like if you're someone who deals with puffiness under your eyes, just go do 30 jumping jacks and get those lymphatics moving to kind of pull and move that lymphatic congestion from that area, and drink plenty of water because it needs to not be sludge and move around. Um,
I love that.
But
That's
when
such a
you're
great.
right, but if you're losing weight, I want you to be aware that you have to go through like an uncomfortable washout period because toxins are stored in our fat tissue. So whether it's like endocrine disruptors, from plastics or phthalates, or whether it's other toxin, they can be stored in the fat tissue. And as that fat is being broken down in the body and released through sweating, urine, defecation, all the ways that we detoxify through our menstrual cycle, all these things, breathing, you may be having like some purging out of your skin and some breakouts. So I often have to hold people's hands through that period of time and just have confidence and faith that if you keep doing the right things and maybe give a little bit of hormonal support and detoxification support, then you can get through that period while your body releases those toxins that need to come out.
Oh, I love that. That is such amazing jewel of information. That is
Good.
great, actually, because especially the women listening to this, I think are, most of them are in their like 30s, 40s, 50s. Getting acne would be weird, and maybe just a little bit unnerving. So just um, having that sense of comfort from you and just hearing that that's normal is really, really helpful. So thank you so much for that.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Um, well, I've taken up so much of your time. I am just so, so grateful. Anything else you want to share, please just take this moment to share where we can find you, what any kind of offerings that you have. I know we mentioned your podcast. If you want to share where that is being hosted or anyone can listen to it.
I really feel like I could talk to you forever. You're so interesting. And for those of you listening, I refused to speak with Alana beforehand because I wanted it to be so raw. So it really was, and it's such a fun conversation. I just felt like I met you at the coffee shop and we just had like the most igniting conversation ever. So I can continue to talk to you forever. I love your mindset. So thank you for having me on.
Yeah.
And I'm at this point in my career where I want to share knowledge with people, especially to empower them and to be confident. So I started my podcast during COVID, total passion project, just to have intellectual conversations. I do it spontaneously. There's like 78 episodes. You're welcome to tune in. It's called Radiance Revealed, and you can find it on every platform. I'm not always, I don't do fresh episodes every week because it's just when I feel like inspired that I do it, right? When I have something meaningful to talk about, not just to talk. And I have an Instagram that I also do spontaneously, Dr. Jen Haley, DrJenHaley. You can find me on LinkedIn. I also work on Minect, doing consultations or clarifying, like translating lab data and things like that I can do for people. But mostly I just like to give free information that will help you make the right choices that are right for you.
Ah, I love that. I love your intention. I love the impact you're making. And just thank you so much for joining me today and for having this conversation. I also feel like I could talk to you forever and that we were in the coffee shop. So the feeling is completely mutual. So thank you so much. And thank you everyone for listening. As always, you can find new episodes of Emotional Eating Unwrapped weekly, where I share how to fall in love with food, lose weight sustainably, lots of free resources on my website, www.bewellbyak.com. And if you found this episode helpful, please share with anyone that would enjoy and benefit from this knowledge. Please subscribe, leave a review. And until next time, I'm Alana, and thank you for listening to Emotional Eating Unwrapped. Yay!